I think climate change is obviously a part of it. These floods are happening more often in more parts of the country and really all over the world. And I don't think it's helpful to have missing key personnel from the National Weather Service.
Today, we're going to watch Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro and CNN join the chorus of liberals trying to blame President Trump for the tragedy that was the Texas floods. Let's get into it.
Now is Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro, whose district is under a disaster declaration. Thank you so much for being here. We are just so sorry for what is happening in and around your district. What is the situation like in the flood zone right now?
Well, it's absolutely devastating. And, San Antonio is about an hour.
Classic CNN.
But Bexar County is part of that disaster declaration. There are about 15 counties that are. And San Antonio also experienced flash floods in June that took the lives of about 13 people. So right now, there are 51 people, it looks like, who have been declared deceased, and still 27 young girls who are missing from Camp Mystic. And most of all, I think people are coming together. They're rallying to support the community and the families who have lost loved ones. It's been very heartening, I know, for everyone to see all the donations and the support that's come in, but just a complete tragedy.
Beyond. You mentioned the more than 20 girls still unaccounted for at Camp Mystic. It's a summer camp along the Guadalupe River and in nearby Kerr County. It was flooded after the river rose more than 20 feet in just 2 hours overnight. What can you tell us about the search for those girls specifically, Congressman?
The effort is intense. The state has sent incredible resources. The local governments from different places, Austin, San Antonio, many others, have sent first responders, just everything that we possibly can to help. I think obviously the priority is on making sure that those girls are found and are saved, and anybody else who may be missing at this point. And then I think after that, we have to figure out in the future how we make sure that it doesn't happen again.
And there is more rain in the forecast to come. How will that affect the rescue efforts?
Obviously, it does make it tougher if those rains start up again, especially if they're flash floods or just torrential rains. As I mentioned, we had a similar issue in San Antonio with flash flooding a few weeks ago, and there were 13 people in a matter of hours whose lives were taken. And so it does make it tougher if that water.
First of all, we'll get back to it in just a second. What an insane question to ask a congressman, not a first responder, not a paramedic or an emergency personnel, but just a congressman who represents the people of that district. Hey, is rain going to make it worse? Yes, Dana Bash. Rain is going to make the flooding worse. Great question, CNN.
Starts to rise again, but I know that there are hundreds and hundreds of folks out there who are searching, and hopefully their efforts will bear fruit.
What questions do you have for federal officials who are involved in this search and rescue and involved in predicting and preventing this kind of tragedy?
Well, look, we have to make sure that the resources are there to save people's lives, to prevent these kinds of tragedies, to make sure that the National Weather Service has all of the personnel and the resources that it needs to make the predictions and then do the analysis that it needs to do to help local communities be prepared for things like this. And then also, I think the state government should take a look at it's got surplus day fund.
Just while CNN deals with their technical difficulties there, just for a moment, that right off the bat, we're saying, okay, we need to make sure the National Weather Service has the personnel it needed to. Numerous employees from the National Weather Service, from the offices in the Austin and in San Antonio areas, said they were actually extra staffed. They were overstaffed in preparation for these floods, for which they warned the area about. Warnings started going out Thursday before the Friday morning flash flooding. Right off the bat, this is something that CNN did, New York Times did, ABC did, that they immediately tried to say, well, Trump's staffing cuts, which we're going to get into in a minute, were not strictly cuts, but already trying to pin the blame on Trump, saying he's setting it up here, saying, "Oh, well, we need to make sure these agencies are properly staffed." They are, and we're gonna get into it a little bit more in a minute here.
That's got tens of billions of dollars at this point. I think the governor and state government should look at what they can do in terms of longer term planning to be helpful in helping to prevent this kind of flooding to the extent that that is possible. Again, this all happened very fast. You're obviously dealing with a natural body of water. And so, but there are things that you can do to mitigate the chances that this happens again in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the key questions. As you said, you want to be prepared and you want government resources to be in place so that there is preparation. But when something happens this quickly, the question is whether preparation is even possible. And on that note, how much do you think the changing climate is part of what we are seeing go on here? Not just what we're seeing in the pictures that we're showing on the screen, but even the flood that you talked about in San Antonio in June.
Before he answers this question, I just let the record show she's not asking a climatologist or a scientist or an oceanographer or anybody who has an expertise in climate. This is CNN, the Trusty Experts Network. She's asking Joaquin Castro, Congressman from Texas, who I believe his background is in law. He's a lawyer, no expertise on climate, but he is going to very confidently assert he knows why the floods happened because of climate change.
I think climate change is obviously a part of it. These floods are happening more often in more parts of the country and really all over the world. And so we have to face that reality and be better prepared for it and combat it.
And just talking about the federal government and even the local government, 2 Texas National Weather Service offices involved in forecasting and warning about flooding on the Guadalupe River are missing some key staff members. A director of the NWS union told CNN that the Austin San Antonio office is missing a warning coordination meteorologist due to the Trump administration's buyouts. Do you have any?
The National Weather Service's office is in New Braunfels, which coordinates disaster response and early warning systems for both San Antonio and Austin. Again, were overstaffed. The people who were out of positions that CNN is alluding to here, the report that came from the National Weather Service's union leader, who was griping about positions not being filled, were because those positions, the people in those positions, were offered voluntary buyouts, which they then took. They were not forced out. To put the blame on the federal government and not the people who said, screw this, I'm out, I think it's a little obviously biased, and it shows how willing and eager CNN and the rest of the usual suspects are to say, how can we politicize this? How can we turn this into Orange Man bad?
Any indication whether those or other cuts helped play a role in the fact that the people in the flood zone were not prepared and certainly not evacuated?
No, I can't say that conclusively, but I do think that it should be and I don't think it's helpful to have missing key personnel from the National Weather Service not in place to help prevent these tragedies. And, when I say that we ought to do everything possible to help prevent a tragedy like again, that's part of what I mean. That's why there's an incredible value to the National Weather Service is because, on most days, obviously, you're not going to have a tragedy like this. But when you have flash flooding, there's a risk that you won't have the personnel to do that analysis, do the predictions in the best way, and it could lead to tragedy. So I don't want to sit here and say conclusively that that was the case, but I do think that it should be investigated, and not having enough personnel is never helpful.
By the way, what a cop-out. I can't sit here and say it wasn't the issue, but, I'd really like to say that because it would make the president, my mortal enemy, look bad. So I'm going to get as close to the line as possible without saying it happened, because his teammates on the left, the other people, right early Friday, were already saying that the National Weather Service cuts, we're talking about voluntary buyouts here, were responsible for the rising death toll in these floodings, which we all agree is tragic and is over 80 now confirmed, with many more still missing. Too tragic to politicize, in my opinion. That's just me. But we have people, we have CNN, we have Democratic Congress people saying, well, we really hate the fact that these National Weather Service cuts are responsible, these missing key personnel. You know, it's funny the way they use language. Key personnel. I would love to know if Dana Bash could give me 4 or 5 bullet points of the job responsibilities for the people, the titles that she's listing there. The people who, by the way, numerous meteorologists from the area, Austin, Texas-based meteorologists, people on the scene, on the ground, were saying National Weather Service did everything right. They did their job. They did nothing wrong. They could not have done anything better. Thursday, they issued warnings. Friday, they escalated those warnings to include potential catastrophic damage and loss of life. These are tragedies. These things happen. And to try to spin them, I really think CNN, the rest of their ilk, would get a lot more credibility if just once they did a story and said, yeah, this shit happens, man. This is bad. National weather tragedies have happened per time immemorial. 1928, the Thrall flooding in Texas. 38 inches of rain in 24 hours. I don't believe they've gotten that much rain again in the 104 years or 97 years since that flood. Tragic, nonetheless. Not Trump's fault. Sorry. Folks, listen, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this content, please give us a like down below on YouTube. Give us a like on Twitter. Share this with your friends. Subscribe. Help us grow. We'll be back.